Hi, everyone. My name is Trish Elliott. I'm the graduate assistant currently in the Ethics and Organizational Behavior program. And today I'm here with Dr. Kirk Mensch. He is the program director of our master's program, as well as a professor of ethics and organizational psychology. And today we're just going to ask him a few questions and tips about how to best study philosophy and how to be successful in our program. Okay, so we'll go right ahead. The first question I'd like to ask you is, how would you suggest students prepare for your course or a similar course that predominantly examines philosophy or ethics?
Well, thanks, Trish. I'm glad you phrased it that way because course in the UK doesn't mean class. It means what we would call a program. So I'll answer it more programmatically because all of our classes have philosophy instilled in the sense that we sort of dig beyond theory, and in order to do that, you have to understand philosophy and logic and things like that. So we try to include those things in the program. I can remember years ago. I was a math economics major undergrad. Then I did an MBA, and I got into my first PhD, and I was just blindsided by the rigor and the amount of reading, and that it was just completely overwhelming. Then, but and that's where I started studying philosophy. Um, when I finished that, I had a problem, but I didn't know what the problem was. The problem lied in philosophy. So that's one of the reasons I went and studied an entire second PhD because, unfortunately, in the U.S. system, I had never really studied philosophy in a formal manner, even though I had gone through all the way, you know, to to the PhD, which is not uncommon. I've met many PhDs in psychology and different fields that literally never took a course in philosophy, which is funny because it stands for Doctor of Philosophy in something, right? So you would think that it would have a philosophy. But I think that's one of the great things about our program. Our program is investigating those problems of philosophy that have seeped themselves into theory, if you want to call it that. I think a lot of theory in certain fields like psychology and leadership. I don't think there's a lot of academicians that would call them theories, maybe concepts or ideologies or something like that. But when they're not testable, when they're not falsifiable, you run into a lot of questions. So, but anyways, to your point, I can remember being confronted with the fact that I knew almost nothing about philosophy except for the economics portion, which is focused in utilitarianism, Bentham and Mill, and all of those people that I had studied, and didn't even realize I was studying philosophy. Honestly, I thought I was studying economics, but it was actually a form of philosophy. Um, and I kind of panicked, and I was trying to figure out how to fill my head with as much information as in the short time that I could. One of the things I remember doing, and it's funny because I grabbed a couple I still had on one of my shelves in my library here. Um, the I went to, I don't know, Barnes and Nobles or one of those big bookstores, and I went to the front, and I where they have all the like $3 books and $5 books and whatnot. And I just started any book that said philosophy for idiots or
Yeah.
philosophy for dummies, or I don't know what they were called. I just started grabbing them, and I bought a whole bunch of them, probably for like $100. I think I got 15 books or something like that. But they were just things like this, like this is just a compilation, the Book of Dead Philosophers. And it just goes through little snippets of here's Pythagoras. People don't know about Pythagoras, but it's just real, like these quick one pagers, and it just goes through every major philosopher throughout history. And it's nice because wherever I stopped, there's a bookmark. I guess I stopped on Arthur Schopenhauer because there's him. If you don't know who that is, so these books, for me, it was about wrapping my head around when people were throwing names out there, Rene Descartes, Immanuel Kant, I didn't even know who they were. It was kind of embarrassing in certain forums because I didn't even know their names, how to pronounce their names properly. Um, so I went out and I bought a bunch of these books. Here's another one. It looks like a children's book, but and it's kind of written like one. Nice big picture there, and then a
Mhm.
ex, uh, explanation. Speaking of Rene Descartes, if you don't know what he kind of looked like, right? So if you ever heard of the Cartesian coordinate system, right, he had something to do with that, and I think therefore I am, those kind of things. So it just talks about that and his relation to Spinoza most likely, but it's very short, and that's how I had to take it in, because I would read just like 2 paragraphs and my head was full, and I'm like, okay, wait, who's Schopenhauer? Again, you're like, wait, he's talking to this person, like, so I just had to get people, and so those books were really helpful. The other thing I would say, um, like when you're talking about classes, one of the things I've noticed with our students is they come out of other programs and they can get away with this, and you can get away with it in our program, but it's going to hurt you. And that is pre-reading. So the minute you get your syllabus, try to find as much reading, I would say that you can manage throughout the syllabus and just get ahead of the game.
Mhm.
Even if there's a reading that's 6 weeks in, and it's like an academic journal article, for example, just do a cursory reading up front. You kind of see what they're going through. Certainly do the pre-reading for the first week. I have too many students coming in the first week and um, not doing that pre-reading, and you just get too far behind and lost. I mean, I taught on the ground there too, so it happens on the ground as well. And I think doing that pre-reading along with, you can work your small chunks into people who focus in different things. I tended to take a historical progression. So I kind of started with probably Epicurus, um, the ancients, and then worked my way through, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, which they refer to as the ancients, and
Mhm.
then I hit Augustine a little bit, the big ones in the medieval periods, Augustine, Aquinas. Aquinas would be so Dark Ages kind of medieval thing, right? But he enveloped scholasticism, another term that comes up a lot. A lot of people don't even know what that is. It's not really hard to figure out. I mean, he just took kind of he took the Bible and tried to marry it up with Aristotle's works that had just recently been translated in, I think it was the 11th century, that he got a hold of, right? So and so he happened to be the first one to get a hold of Aristotle's work and try to marry it with his theology, and he come out with this thing called scholasticism. It's being talked about more in virtue ethics these days. How do I know that? I don't know. I mean, little chunks over the years,
Absolutely.
The other thing I would say, beyond the pre-reading, like if you're coming into the first course, if you know you're going to do this, the minute you get accepted, you should go grab those books I was talking about and start watching videos. There's a bazillion videos on every topic. I mean, it's philosophy, right? The only thing to be careful of is people have different spins on different things, right? So Bertrand Russell wrote a book, I think it's called A Short History of Ethics. I think that's what his is called. Is that his, or no? His is A Brief History of Ethics. It's about that thick, okay? Uh, but it's very skewed. He was an anti-theist, and so he like hand waves Immanuel Kant off and just says, oh, he had too much theology and whatever, and so just kind of waves him away. And anybody that was kind of like that, he just sort of discounts. Um, so and we tend to focus on McIntyre, I think for that reason, because he's a Christian philosopher.
Right.
He's a Catholic philosopher at Notre Dame, was at Edinburgh, very very famous. Um, and I would say that just generally speaking, one of the things that helped me in the past was if I've it's got to be more than one person, I would say, but if I found 3 or 4 people that I connected with right in the first week of a class I was taking, I tried to form an informal study group just because I
Mhm.
thought usually it had to do with the fact they were studying something that they were interested in, a topic I was interested in. But the other reason is they had certain good aspects of research that I thought could help me, and vice versa. See, I would just look for those people, have a conversation, go to lunch with them, during the first week, or get on a Teams call, talk about your research interests and stuff like that, and help yourself, in that sort of group study format. This is graduate school, right? I mean, let's level up. I mean, that's what we do in the academy, right? I have colleagues all over the world. There's not many of us that can have the conversations that we have. So in the context of a class, form those study groups at the beginning, if you want to call them that, or you can call them like accountability groups, because that's another thing. You get those little reminders, and then just set up like a weekly 1 hour call with 4 people. I don't need to be involved. The professor doesn't even need to know about it. But I can guarantee you, you do that over 9 classes, and you're going to be so much ready, more prepared for your for the end of the thesis at the end of the day.
That's actually a great point, because one of my favorite things about some of the classes was when we would talk about our thesis research topics with each other. I mean,
Yeah.
I think all of us formed our thesis research topics by bouncing things off of each other, because sometimes you're so focused on one thing, you don't see the bigger picture that your students are seeing from a different perspective. So that's our peers. Okay, well, this actually goes great into our next question, the pre-reading the McIntyre talk. My next question is, do you have any tips or tricks for students to best tackle heavily philosophical assigned readings such as McIntyre, readings that a lot of us probably haven't done before?
Yeah. Uh, well, let me just clarify something, because I had some students tell me that that they like the class, and I actually I'm not I teach history of ethics, and I'm not using McIntyre as the primary text this year. But I want to say something about that, just so everybody knows. If you think McIntyre's a tough read, um, I give Being and Time a shot. And after you're through about the first 10 pages, you will never ask me that question again. All right. Read anything by Sartre or the existentialists, or more this recent philosophy, and or go back to some of the original works of Kant, for example, on his moral inquiry type thing. And you tell me what's harder reading. Okay. I mean, at least I can make sense of McIntyre. I remember walking around with a treatise that Kant wrote, trying to figure out I almost had to go through word for word. And this wasn't. It would be embarrassing to say it was more than 20 years ago, because it was less. I'd say maybe 15, but it was really hard to understand. So I mean, that's where I say this. So you get a topic, right, and you have a reading, but there's so many helps these days. I put crash courses into my classes. Crash courses are like the 8-minute videos, right? And it's like, okay, so if we have a topic on the categorical imperative, right? Well, there's a crash course video on Kant's categorical imperative, what that means, and how that was the sort of the beginning of this philosophy we call deontology, right? So I think that stuff like that's really helpful. Those crash course videos, podcasts, they're great. Um, there's one that's that I learned a lot from. It's one of those ones that if you have a long commute, um, that's how it helped me. I used to have long commutes when I was a consultant, and so I'd put on the Partially Examined Life podcast. They're a little coarse for my taste. They have, they have some maybe off-color jokes or whatever, use some language, but talk about knowledgeable. And I think there are over 300 podcasts now. Basically, if you have a topic, they probably have a podcast that'll bring on an expert, and the three of them are they like to say that they never finished their PhDs in philosophy, but you can tell they're brilliant and very well versed in philosophy. But they'll bring in an expert to talk about these topics, and you can pretty much pick a topic these days, and they cover it. And their podcasts will go up to about 3 hours. They're like Rogan's podcast, So great wealth of information. I mean, I was just on Ethics TV, right? So
Right.
another growing podcast. I just think those in the crash courses. And so what I'm getting at is there's different ways that your brain learns, right? And along with videos and things like that, if you lean on them too much, you're not gonna make it. You have to be able to read philosophy. So I can't emphasize the reading part enough, because my sense is, and this is just my gut, but my sense is there's probably people not doing enough reading and watching too many videos. And that can be dangerous because of the way your brain remembers things. So you gotta get into the books, even if it's the books that aren't on the list. Remember, there's a whole library there. So if you're going to do a program like this and you really want to be successful in life, look, Bill Gates said this, Elon Musk talks about I'll talk about it, right? How many books have you read this past month, right? Don't
Right.
answer that. Don't answer that. I would ask the students that. And if you say one or none, you're probably not on a track that is going to bring you to the kind of brilliance or wisdom someday that some of those people have. And so you just have to, and it's one of those things that is addictive. It's kind of like if you haven't worked out in a while, like after I work out, if I do upper body or if I go jogging, whatever part of the body I haven't worked out in a while, I'm going to be in pain for a week or two, right? Just my muscles. It's the same thing with your head. You get into reading, and then you almost sort of getting those endorphins flowing from it, and you can't put it down. But it takes a little bit of time, and I think that's that hump. You pick up the book, that same book for every 2 weeks for 1 hour, right? For 5 days for 2 weeks, and you won't want to put it down. You'll be thinking about, I can't wait to what the next chapter is going to say. And I think that's that kind of thing that we need that back in our society generally, because we've leaned so much since COVID, especially on digital learning, that people just forgot that books have existed for thousands of years, and
Right.
pretty good way to learn. So I would, I guess those would be the things I would encourage students to do.
That's a great point. So primarily the reading, but videos and podcasts. YouTube is one of my best friends for sure when I can't totally figure something out. So I love that.
And
Okay.
every class matters, I think, is an important component to that too, because like you were saying, having those discussions with people in the context of a different class is really going to help you as an individual. You should be getting around the table and arguing. And I don't mean throwing food at each other or yelling at each other in the library. That's not what philosophers call arguing. We argue our points, and you're expecting pushback, and you're expecting to, wait a minute, that's a good point. And reflection. Wait, is their argument logical? Is my argument logical? Maybe they just exposed a problem with my thinking. Those conversations are wonderful to have. Even on calls like this, we have this capability these days. You don't have to sit around, one of the rooms in the library, although I would encourage it if you have the opportunity. But I have conversations all the time in forums like this with colleagues, and you just have to have that kind of rational debate that's not happening most places. So hopefully for every class.
Absolutely. And that makes sense because ultimately, I'm sure you would say we have to defend our thesis to get through the entire program. So that's just helping us to get to that end point. Okay, so our last question has to do with that also, actually. In your experience, are there any other useful tips you would give students to finish the thesis in good form?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things I would say there beyond what I've already said, which is all, sort of aimed in that general direction. But I would say first, you want to try to develop a cogent line of research early. The way to do that is all of the things we just said. If you come in and you treat it like an MBA class where one class doesn't have much to do with the other class, that's not our program. Our program allows the students to continue this line of research and refine it. That doesn't mean one paper one class should look like a paper another class. That's not at all what I mean. In fact, they should look very different because the whole context of the class is different. Change the context, change the paper. Doesn't mean you can't continue on, gathering more and more research on a general topic within the context of the class. That's why those classes are set up the way they are, and why they focus on the one hand on psychology, why they focus on leadership, why they focus on ethics, why they focus on philosophy of science. I mean, those are just important contexts to try to develop that cogent line of research. The earlier you can do that in our program, the earlier you'll be able to start doing another thing, which I wish our students, everybody listen to me right now. There are lots of professors at PBA, and they're not just in CTMS, and they're not just in our EOB program. There's lots of wonderful professors at PBA. They do research. It's online. Look them up. Run into them. Find out what they study, what they teach. Get their perspective. Say, I'm working on a thesis. Would you mind talking to me for an hour? Can I come to your office for a half hour and talk? Maybe they'll even go to lunch with you. I mean, do those things. You're graduate students. You're working on a master's thesis. That hopefully a lot of you are looking for some kind of publication later on. Tell them that. just you being interested in their research most of the time will get them. Most people like us want to talk about our research. That's all we do. Like, like we spent 2 years working on the paper we just submitted for publication. Think about it, 2 years for one paper.
Yeah.
And so they want to talk about it. Well, they're there. Go ask them. Don't be afraid to reach out to a professor at another university, and say, I'm looking at this topic. I just wanted your insight because I read your paper. I remember I had a research program. Yeah, it was at the doctoral level, but this is still a master's thesis. It's the same kind of thinking, and a student reached out to a professor at a university that the student didn't know that I knew the professor. And the professor emailed me, and then I didn't know this was going to happen. The students had to do a presentation on their research that they were working on, and this student, she zoomed in the professor into the class, and I didn't know she was going to do that, and I was like, Professor Carr, how nice to see you.
How funny.
It was crazy, but she was afraid to reach out to him because she thought, why would I be reaching out to a professor from Harvard or something like that? Who cares? If they're not any smarter than any of you, so they're just at a different place in their life. Go and reach out and talk to them. There's lots of people at PBA right there like that. Get in touch with them. I would say the cautionary tale there would be don't let somebody lead you down a research path that you don't really want to go down. Remember, because it's your thesis, right? So sometimes, unfortunately, I've seen that. I don't think it would happen a lot at PBA because of the values we have. That's one of the reasons I'm there. But there are professors, some universities that try to use students and things like that to get papers published and stuff. And it's getting out there. We got some pretty smart students doing some pretty good papers, and they are working on publishing them, and they are going to conferences, and they already have, and not little conferences either, big prestigious conferences. So, the word's kind of getting out there. That's why I always tell our faculty, don't ever take first author on a student's thesis. Other universities will do that. I do not like that. Not unless the professor has contributed clearly more than the student, because normally it was the student's idea. But they're going to be interested in that too. Most professors will take a second author paper if the student's done most of the work. And so those are things that are just going on sort of in the background. I'd just be careful that you don't get somebody who's trying to rope you into being their research supervisor for the wrong reason. In fact, you shouldn't even be talking with anybody about being a supervisor. And if they bring it up, you shouldn't, as a student, shouldn't bring it up. And if they bring it up and say, "Oh, that's not up to me," Dr. Achazi, Dr. Al Achazi is in charge of assigning research supervisors. But if you're not on the list, have them reach out to Dr. Achazi to get on the list. And if he thinks they're a good fit, that's kind of how it works. We have had some students, talking to professors about supervisors, and then, Dr. Achazi is getting blindsided. And he's like, "Sorry, that person's not qualified. I haven't qualified them." And then I have to approve them afterwards. And so it makes us puts us in a bad spot. Don't do that.
Right.
And then the other thing I'd follow up with, and we're starting to do this with the newsletter, which, by the way, Trish writes most of the newsletters, and I just like, yeah, that's just great, right? But I think the redundancy in the policy information is good. But if you're a new student, you need to take time and sit down, and there's videos that explain the thesis that Dr. Achazi did. There's all kinds of clear policy information. And yet I have students coming in their 8th course asking how they get a research supervisor. I mean, it's right there. So, you got to understand the limitations we have as faculty. I want research faculty. I want our faculty going to present at conferences, publishing papers, doing their job as professors. That's what professors are supposed to be doing. And then that's why I don't like calling our professors teachers, because I want them being at the top of their field so they actually can profess. What the difference is, it means they don't need to have slides. They can just profess, right?
Right.
So I think, because I'm trying to do it on the one hand, we need sort of help from the students on the other to manage your curriculum. It's all there. there's some things that'll happen, like we're looking at changing up the rotation next year, but all those things are still in the works. But the information's going to come out, and it'll come out far ahead of time. We just need to read it. And I'm getting too many questions. It has been less the last month or two, probably because of the newsletters and things. But I would just say that when you get into the program, just read through all the policies, and then call you maybe, or ask a peer, or call the chair, or if it's a strategic issue, call me. We'll figure it out. But I think getting on board sort of what the program is about early is really important, because we are different. This is not the MBA program, right? I mean, it's just not. It's very, very
Right.
research oriented. So a lot of students aren't going to get it. And I would say, before you even talk to anybody, and get in the program, read through those policies, what you're getting yourself into. If you do that and you get on board early, what a great opportunity it is, to go through 9 courses to develop something, then, go to, the United Kingdom, like we took 2 students this summer and present at a prestigious conference, meet people from Oxford and Cambridge and Durham and Exeter and all these, places, and one of them leaving going, I really want to be a professor. I just don't know if I can make enough money. And before the conference, it's like, I don't know. No, I'm going to go be a consultant, make all kinds of money. But afterwards, they see the engagement, and it is very, very, and a very appealing job. Maybe not if you want to be a billionaire, but, I mean, it could be very.
There's not many jobs that you can go into to be a billionaire. So, well, thank you so much. And just so everyone knows, there are a lot of different places where you can get those policy documents. Like you said, the newsletters have links to it. The Student Hub, SharePoint, and also Canvas are all places that they can go to find policies, and honestly links to pretty much anything they could want, how to write, different things like that. But I really appreciate you taking this time with us. I know that this has helped me more than I even realized it would, just having this conversation with you. And I hope that other students who get the opportunity to see this also feel that way. So just thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Trish. And I hope they reach out to you as well,
Definitely.
as our graduate assistant. And, uh, the if they're struggling with something, just they got to reach out early. I'll leave it with that, because I get a little disappointed when a student drops off and then I get an email 2 months later, and there's not much. There's policies that are in place that I have to follow. So that's why I'm focused so much on reading our policy, because our policy goes beyond PBA. If you follow our policy, you'll be in line with PBA policy, and I think
Right.
that, along with those extra tips, it's a great opportunity. I just got off of a call yesterday with another university that is probably going to try to copy us down the road. They won't for a little while, just out of respect for me. But there's a lot of interest in what we're doing, a lot of interest in what all you are studying, and just excited about your future. And I'm excited to read the next round of theses coming out. It's awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good one.